The translator device had been malfunctioning for 3 days, and Ambassador Lyra Okoye was tired of repeating herself. She stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, a circular room so vast that the ceiling disappeared into darkness above. 847 species had sent their representatives here, and every single one of them was staring at her. Some had eyes, some had sensory stalks, some perceived the world through vibrations or heat signatures, but all of them were focused on the small human woman who had come to complete a simple ceremony. 50 years, that was how long humanity had waited for this moment. 50 years of probationary membership, of proving themselves worthy, of learning galactic customs and trade languages and diplomatic protocols. Today was supposed to be the final step, the formal registration of Earth in the Cosmic Archive. High Speaker Dorvax towered above the assembly, his crystalline body catching the light and scattering it into rainbows across the chamber walls. He was ancient, even by galactic standards, and he had presided over thousands of these ceremonies. Ambassador Okoye, his voice resonated through the hall, please confirm your homeworld's designation for the archive. Lyra smiled. This was the easy part. Earth, third planet from our sun, located in what you call the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy. A small, moth-like creature named Counselor Thresh operated the archive terminal nearby. His wings twitched as he entered the data, and Lyra noticed his antennae flatten against his head, a sign of confusion among his species. There seems to be an error, Thresh said, his voice high and nervous. The classification matrix is requesting additional environmental parameters. High Speaker Dorvax turned his massive form toward the terminal. What parameters? Atmospheric composition, gravity index, temperature variance, orbital stability. Thresh's wings were trembling now. The system is flagging multiple anomalies. Lyra felt a small knot form in her stomach. I can provide whatever information you need. Earth's atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen with trace amounts of oxygen. The word came from Admiral Venn, the military commander of the Federation fleet. She was a tall, serpentine being with scales that shifted color based on her emotional state. Right now, they were cycling rapidly between gray and pale yellow. You breathe oxygen. Yes, Lyra was confused by the reaction. Is that unusual? No one answered. Counselor Thresh continued entering data with shaking appendages. The chamber had gone quiet in a way that made Lyra's skin prickle. Gravity index, Thresh read aloud, 1.0 standard units. That seems wrong, High Speaker Dorvax said. Please verify. Lyra pulled up her tablet. Our gravity is approximately 9.8 meters per second squared. I believe that converts to 1.42 on the galactic standard scale, Thresh finished. His voice had become a whisper. That cannot be correct. I assure you it is. Lyra looked around the chamber. Something was very wrong. Representatives were shifting in their seats, exchanging glances, making subtle gestures to one another. Is there a problem? Temperature variance, Thresh continued, ignoring her question. Negative 89 to 57 on the Celsius scale, seasonal fluctuation averaging 40 degrees in temperate zones. Ambassador Okoye, High Speaker Dorvax spoke slowly, carefully. Does liquid water exist on your planet's surface? Yes, about 70% of Earth is covered by oceans. The crystalline being flickered. It was subtle, just a momentary dimming of his internal light, but Lyra had studied enough alien biology to know this was the equivalent of a human going pale. And this water, Dorvax continued, it falls from your sky. We call it rain. It happens quite often, actually. A delegate from a species Lyra did not recognize made a sound like a wounded animal and left the chamber. 2 others followed. Counselor Thresh completed his entries. The archive processed the information for exactly 3 seconds. Then it displayed a single symbol on every screen in the chamber, an ancient glyph that predated the Federation itself by millions of years. Lyra did not recognize it, but clearly everyone else did. High Speaker Dorvax's form flickered again, more violently this time. Admiral Ven's scales had gone completely white. Counselor Thresh had stopped moving entirely, his compound eyes fixed on the screen as if he had been frozen in place. "What does it say?" Lyra asked. Her voice echoed in the silent chamber. No one spoke. "What does it say?" She demanded it this time, her diplomatic patience finally cracking. Scholar Nix, an elderly amphibian who served as the Federation's chief. Historian was the only one who seemed capable of speech. He rose from his seat slowly, his aged body trembling as he approached the central platform. "Ambassador Akoy," he said, his voice ancient and tired, "in all my years of study, I believed this classification to be purely theoretical, a mathematical boundary, an impossible extreme that no actual world could ever reach." "What classification?" Scholar Nix looked at her with something she had never seen in alien eyes before. Fear, deep, primal, absolute fear. "Class 12, he said the words like a prayer for the dead. "Your planet is a Class 12 death world. The precursors had a name for such a place. They called it the Crucible." The chamber erupted. Lyra stood at the center of the chaos, watching 800 species panic around her, and she had only one thought. What had she missed about home? 17 delegates had fainted. Lyra counted them as medical teams carried their unconscious forms out of the chamber. The emergency session had been called within minutes of the archive's classification. Security drones now hovered at every entrance, and the station's shields had been raised to maximum, though Lyra could not understand what threat a single human ambassador could possibly pose. "This is madness," she said, standing before the reduced council. Only about 200 representatives had remained. The rest had fled to their ships or locked themselves in their quarters. "I have done nothing wrong. My species has done nothing wrong. We completed a standard registration ceremony." Admiral Ven coiled her serpentine body tighter, her scales still that unsettling shade of white. "You exist. That is the problem." "Explain that to me." Lyra's patience was gone. "Explain why my planet's classification has caused this reaction." High Speaker Dorvax had stabilized somewhat, though his light remained dim. He gestured towards Scholar Nix, who shuffled forward with a portable display unit. "The Deathworld classification system," the old amphibian began, "was created by the precursors approximately 12 million years ago. They were the first spacefaring civilization in this galaxy, and they surveyed every world capable of supporting life." He activated the display. A scale appeared, numbered 1 through 12. Class 1 worlds are paradise planets. Stable climates, abundant resources, minimal predation. Most Federation species evolved on Class 1. Or Class 2 worlds, he pointed to the lower numbers. Class 3 introduces mild challenges, seasonal changes, occasional storms, some dangerous wildlife. "And the higher numbers?" Lyra asked. Class 4 and 5 worlds have significant environmental hazards. Extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, aggressive fauna. Very few species emerge from these worlds, and those that do are considered remarkably hardy." Scholar Nix paused. "Class 6 through 9 are considered uninhabitable. We have found remnants of extinct civilizations on a few such planets, but no living examples." "What about 10 and 11? "Theoretical. The mathematics of planetary formation suggested they could exist, but none had ever been discovered. Until today, the highest classified death world in the archive was a Class 7, a volcanic nightmare that produced a silicon-based species now extinct for 3 million years. Lyra stared at the display, and Class 12. Scholar Nix's throat sacs inflated and deflated rapidly, his species equivalent of a deep breath. Class 12 was never meant to be real. The precursors included it as a ceiling, a mathematical limit. They calculated what conditions would be necessary to reach such a classification and concluded that no world meeting those criteria could produce life. The environment would be too hostile, the challenges too constant, evolution itself would fail. "But Earth exists." "Earth exists," Scholar Nix agreed. "And you exist. which means the precursors were wrong, or perhaps he hesitated. Perhaps they were not predicting impossibility. Perhaps they were predicting something else entirely. Admiral Venn uncoiled slightly. How many of them are there? Humans, I mean. How many have left their world? Lyra considered lying. She could see the fear in the chamber, could feel it pressing against her like a physical force. But she was a diplomat, and diplomats dealt in truth. Billions, she said. Billions of us live on Earth, and millions more have spread to other planets, space stations, and colony ships. The silence that followed was absolute. Counselor Thresh finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Billions, billions of Class 12 beings already among us. We are not monsters, Lyra said firmly. We are people. We have art and music and poetry. We raise families and build communities and dream of the stars just like everyone else. You breathe poison, Admiral Venn said flatly. Your planet's atmosphere would kill every being in this room within minutes. You survive temperature ranges that would destroy our cities. You drink a liquid so corrosive it dissolves metal over time. And you call this normal. Lyra opened her mouth to respond, but Scholar Nix raised a withered hand. The ambassador does not understand, he said gently. She cannot understand. To her, Earth is simply home. She has no frame of reference for how extraordinary that home truly is. He turned to face the council. Consider what we have learned. Humans evolved on a world with crushing gravity, in an atmosphere of reactive gas, on a planet that experiences constant geological and meteorological violence. Their world is covered in a substance that burns our skin, and it falls from the sky regularly. They share their planet with millions of other species, many of which are venomous, predatory, or parasitic. Scholar Nix's voice grew heavy. And despite all of this, they did not merely survive. They thrived. They conquered their world. They reached into space. They came to us with open hands and asked to be friends. He looked at Lyra with those ancient, tired eyes. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether humans are dangerous. Everything about them suggests they are the most dangerous beings this galaxy has ever produced. The question is what made them this way. What do you mean? Lyra asked. I mean, Ambassador, that Class 12 conditions should be impossible to survive. So what threats did your ancestors face that forced them to become strong enough to do so? What nightmares lived on Earth that required this level of adaptation? Lyra thought of dinosaurs, of ice ages, of mass extinctions and world-spanning plagues and disasters that reshaped the planet again and again. Everything, she said quietly. We survived everything. Scholar Nix nodded slowly. Yes, he said, I rather think you did. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had been sleeping peacefully on the human research vessel Horizon when the emergency summons arrived. 12 hours later, she stood in a secured briefing room aboard Station Meridian, facing a collection of alien beings who looked at her like she was a bomb about to explode. Ambassador Akoi had requested a xenobiologist to help explain Earth's environment, and Yuki was the most qualified human within range. Thank you for coming, Doctor, Ambassador Akoi said. Exhaustion in her voice was obvious. The Council has requested a detailed presentation on Earth's environmental conditions. They want to understand how we evolved. Yuki nodded and connected her tablet to the holographic display system. I have prepared a standard overview of Earth's biosphere. Should I begin? Please, High Speaker Dorvac said. His crystalline form still flickered occasionally, though less severely than before. Yuki activated the first image, a beautiful photograph of Earth from orbit, blue and green and swirling with white clouds. This is our homeworld, she began. Earth is the third planet in our solar system, approximately 150 million kilometers from our sun. It has one natural satellite, which we call the Moon, and it completes one orbit around the sun every 365 days. The composition of your atmosphere, Admiral Venn interrupted. Tell us about that. Of course, Yuki switched to a chart. Earth's atmosphere is approximately 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% trace gases. The oxygen content is maintained by photosynthetic organisms, plants, and algae, which convert carbon dioxide into breathable air. Oxygen is a highly reactive element, Scholar Nix explained to the council members who seemed confused. At the concentration present in Earth's atmosphere, it would be toxic to most known life forms. It also creates conditions for rapid oxidation. Fire, Yuki translated. He means fire. Yes, our atmosphere supports combustion. It is actually quite useful for cooking and heating. Several delegates made distressed sounds. Moving on to gravity, Yuki continued. Earth's surface gravity is approximately 9.8 meters per second squared. This is 40% higher than galactic average, Admiral Venn said. We calculated this already. Correct. This higher gravity affects everything about our biology. Our bones are denser, our muscles stronger, our cardiovascular systems more powerful. A human who grew up on Earth and then visited a lower gravity world would find themselves significantly more capable physically. Yuki paused, noticing the council's discomfort. Perhaps I should discuss our weather patterns. She showed them hurricanes. They stared in horror. She showed them tornadoes. A delegate vomited into a receptacle. She showed them blizzards, droughts, floods, and wildfires. By the time she reached earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, half the remaining council members had requested medical attention. These are not rare events, Yuki said, perhaps unwisely. Hurricanes occur dozens of times per year. Earthquakes happen daily, though most are too small to notice. Volcanic eruptions are less frequent but still common. Earth's geological activity is quite robust. How do you survive? Counselor Thresh asked. His voice was small, fragile. How does anyone survive? Yuki considered the question. We adapt. We build structures to withstand storms. We develop early warning systems for natural disasters. When bad things happen, we rebuild. Humans are very good at rebuilding. Show them the animals, Ambassador Akoi said quietly. Yuki hesitated. Are you sure? They need to understand everything. With a sigh, Yuki began cycling through Earth's fauna. She started with the cute ones, rabbits and deer and songbirds. Then she moved to the predators, lions, tigers, bears. The council watched in stunned silence. She showed them sharks and crocodiles and Komodo dragons. She showed them venomous snakes and poisonous frogs and spiders that could kill with a single bite. When she displayed an image of a cassowary, Counselor Thresh actually screamed. This is a bird, Yuki said. It cannot fly, but it can disembowel a human with its claws. We have them in zoos. Children visit them on school trips. Your children visit animals that can kill them. Admiral Venn's scales had gone a color that Yuki's translator could not identify. For entertainment. Education primarily, but yes, also entertainment. The final section of the presentation covered human evolution itself. Yuki explained how early humans had survived by developing intelligence, cooperation, and endurance. She described persistence hunting, the practice of chasing prey for hours or even days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Wait, Scholar Nix interrupted. You are saying that humans would pursue a single animal across vast distances, refusing to stop, refusing to give up, until the animal physically could not run anymore. Yes, humans are not the fastest runners, but we have exceptional endurance. We can regulate our body temperature through sweating, which allows us to continue physical activity long after other species would overheat. Our ancestors used this to hunt. Scholar Nix sat down heavily. Do you understand? Now, he said to the council, they do not simply survive the crucible, they dominate it. They chase death itself until it grows tired. Yuki frowned. That seems like an exaggeration. It is not, Admiral Venn said. Her voice had changed. The fear was still there, but something else had joined it, something that might have been respect. Dr. Tanaka, in all my years of military service, I have never encountered a species as terrifying as yours, not because you are violent or cruel, but because you are impossible. You should not exist. And yet here you are showing us pictures of your murderous birds. Yuki smiled slightly. We have worse than cassowaries. I do not doubt it. Scholar Nix rose again. There is something else the Council must see. Doctor, please display Earth's extinction event history. Yuki complied. The timeline appeared 5 major mass extinctions spanning hundreds of millions of years, each one wiping out most life on the planet. Scholar Nix studied the data. Then he turned to the Council with an expression of profound realization. The Crucible does not simply create survivors, he said. It creates beings who have already survived the apocalypse, multiple apocalypses. Earth has ended 5 times and humanity is still standing. The chamber fell silent. What does that mean for us? Counselor Thresh finally asked. Scholar Nix did not answer, but his eyes found Ambassador Akoy, and in them was something new. Hope. The ship carrying the delegation was older than some civilizations. Ambassador Akoy pressed her hand against the cold metal wall and felt a vibration that seemed almost alive. The vessel had been built by the precursors themselves, maintained across millions of years by automated systems, and it was taking them to a place that most Federation citizens did not even know existed. The Archive of First Words. Scholar Nix stood beside her, his aged body supported by a hovering mobility frame. High Speaker Dorvax had insisted on joining them personally, which had caused significant controversy among the Council. A being of his importance rarely left Station Meridian. Why did the precursors build this place? Lyra asked. To remember, Scholar Nix replied. They knew they would not last forever. No civilization does, so they created the archive to preserve their knowledge for whoever came after. The ship descended through layers of ancient security fields and into a vast underground chamber carved from the heart of a dead moon. Structures of impossible geometry rose from the darkness, illuminated by lights that had been burning for 12 million years. A voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the stone itself. Welcome, travelers. I am Keeper Solace. I have waited long for this conversation. Lyra looked around but saw no speaker. You are the archive's guardian. I am what remains of the precursors, their final creation, a mind built to preserve and to teach. The voice paused. I have watched your species, Ambassador Akoy. I have watched since your first satellites left Earth's gravity. I wondered if you would find your way here. You knew about us? High Speaker Dorvax asked. His light pulsed with surprise. I knew a Class 12 world existed in your region of the galaxy. I detected the Crucible's signature long ago, but I did not know if life had emerged there or if that life had survived to reach the stars. They walked deeper into the archive. Holographic displays activated as they passed, showing star charts and biological diagrams and historical records in languages that had been dead for eons. Tell us about the classification system, Scholar Nix said. Tell us why Class 12 was included. Keeper Solace led them to a central chamber where a massive projection filled the space, a map of the galaxy marked with countless points of light. The precursors surveyed 100 billion worlds over the course of 50,000 years. They cataloged every environment, every species, every possibility. The Deathworld scale was created to warn future civilizations about dangerous planets. The display zoomed to show individual worlds. Class 1 through 9 represented actual hazards that the precursors had encountered. Class 10 and 11 were extrapolations, theoretical extremes based on mathematical models. Class 12, the voice hesitated. Class 12 was something else entirely. What do you mean? Lyra asked. The precursors did not create Class 12 as a warning. They created it as a prophecy. The holographic display changed. Now it showed ancient text in the precursor language, which Keeper Solace translated aloud. If life emerges from a Class 12 world, it will be unlike anything the galaxy has known. Forged in fire and pressure, tempered by constant death, refined through endless catastrophe, such beings will go where none can follow. They will endure what none can survive. They will protect what none can save. High Speaker Dorvax's form brightened. Protect. The prophecy speaks of protection. Yes, the precursors believed that Class 12 beings would not be destroyers, but guardians. The very forces that made them strong would also make them compassionate. They would understand suffering because they had endured it. They would value life because they had fought so hard to keep it. Scholar Nix moved closer to the display. You said the precursors watched humanity. Did they leave any specific messages for us? They left one message. Keeper Solace's voice grew heavy. A warning about why such guardians would be needed. The display changed again. This time it showed the galaxy not as it was, but as it had been surrounded by darkness, pressed upon by something vast and terrible lurking in the void between galaxies. The precursors did not die of natural causes. They did not fade away or destroy themselves. They were consumed. Something came from the space between galaxies, something that feeds on life and light and thought. The precursors fought it for 10,000 years before the end came. Their final act was to build this archive and to leave their warning. What was the warning? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. That the enemy would return, that the galaxy would face this darkness again, and that the only hope, the only possible hope, would be beings forged in conditions harsh enough to create true survivors, beings from the crucible. The chamber fell silent. The holographic display showed the encroaching darkness, ancient and patient, waiting in the void. When, High Speaker Dorvax asked, when will it return? Unknown, time moves differently in the void. It could be tomorrow, it could be 1,000,000 years, but the signs suggest sooner rather than later. The darkness has already begun to stir. Ambassador Akoy stood in the ancient chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of a civilization that had died fighting the same enemy that would someday threaten her own people. She thought about Earth, about hurricanes and earthquakes and ice ages and mass extinctions. She thought about all the ways her species had learned to survive. The precursors believed in us, she said. They believed that humanity would be the answer. They believed in the possibility of you, Keeper Solace corrected. Now you must decide if they were right. The prophecy speaks of guardians who will protect what none can save. Will humanity accept that role, or will you leave the galaxy to face the darkness alone? Lyra looked at Scholar Nix and High Speaker Dorvax. She saw fear in their eyes, but also something else. Trust. Fragile, uncertain, desperate trust. I cannot speak for all humanity, she said, but I can speak for myself. I did not survive a death world to run from a fight. Keeper Solace's voice softened. Then perhaps the precursors were right to hope. 1 week changed everything. The Grand Council chamber was full for the first time since the initial panic. All 847 species had sent representatives, though many of them sat in protective environmental suits or watched through holographic projections from the safety of their ships. Fear still lingered in the air, but it had been joined by something else: curiosity, and perhaps even hope. Ambassador Lyra Akoy stood at the center of the chamber, just as she had 7 days ago when a simple ceremony had turned into chaos. But everything was different now. She was different. High Speaker Dorvax called the assembly to order. We gather today to discuss the status of humanity within the Galactic Federation. The revelations of the past week have raised questions that must be answered. I open the floor to Counselor Vex of the Delmer Coalition. A tall insectoid being rose from his seat. The Coalition demands that humans be quarantined immediately. Their very existence poses a threat to galactic stability. They evolved on a world that should have killed them, which means they are fundamentally unpredictable. We cannot allow such beings to move freely among us. Murmurs of agreement rippled through certain sections of the chamber. Another delegate stood, a gelatinous being from a water world. We propose an alternative. Humans should be integrated into the Federation military as shock troops. Their resilience makes them ideal soldiers. Let them fight our wars and protect our borders. Lyra felt her jaw tighten. She had expected both arguments, quarantine or weaponization, the two extremes that fear always produced. May I speak? The voice came from Admiral Venn. Her scales had returned to their normal blue-gray, and she moved to the center platform with deliberate grace. "I have studied humans for 50 years, she began. "I commanded the fleet that made first contact with their colony ships. I have watched them negotiate trade agreements and respond to emergencies and interact with species they had never encountered before. I was afraid of them. I will not pretend otherwise. When I learned the truth about Earth, I believed we had made a terrible mistake allowing them into the Federation." She paused, letting the words settle. "I was wrong." The chamber went quiet. "Humans are dangerous, this is undeniable, but danger is not the same as malice. A storm is dangerous. A star is dangerous. These things can destroy, but they do not choose to destroy. They simply are what they are." She turned to face the full assembly. "Humans choose, and in 50 years of observation, do you know what I have seen them choose?" She activated a holographic display. Images appeared: human rescue teams pulling survivors from collapsed buildings, human doctors treating alien patients during a plague outbreak, human engineers working to repair a damaged space station. I have seen humans run toward danger while every other species runs away. I have seen them sacrifice their own safety to help strangers. I have seen them adopt orphaned children from species they barely understood, simply because those children needed someone. More images: a human firefighter carrying an unconscious alien through flames, a human soldier standing guard over civilians during an attack, a human scientist working without sleep for days to develop a cure for a disease that could not even infect her own species. "This is what the Crucible created," Admiral Venn said. "Not monsters, not weapons, protectors, because on a world where everything is trying to kill you, the only way to survive is together." Humans learned cooperation not as a convenience, but as a necessity. They learned to value every life because they knew how easily life could be lost. Scholar Nix rose to add his voice. "The precursors foresaw this. Their prophecy spoke of guardians who would protect what none can save. They did not fear the tempered ones, they hoped for them, they needed them." High Speaker Dorvax turned to Ambassador Akoy. "The Council would hear from humanity directly. Ambassador, what do you say?" Lyra stepped forward. She had prepared a speech, full of diplomatic language and careful phrasing. But standing here, looking at the faces of 800 species who had spent a week terrified of her existence, she threw it away. "I understand your fear," she said. "I do. We come from a world that sounds like a nightmare to you. We breathe poison and drink corrosive liquid and survive catastrophes that would end your civilizations. By every measure, we should not exist." She spread her hands. "But we do exist, and we did not claw our way out of the crucible to become conquerors or destroyers. We came to the stars because we wanted to see what else was out there. We joined the Federation because we wanted friends. We learned your languages and customs and laws because we wanted to belong." Her voice grew stronger. "You have learned the name of our world. You call it the Crucible, a forge that creates the strongest metal through fire and pressure. Fine. If that is what we are, then let us be useful. Let us stand between you and whatever darkness waits in the void. Not because we are weapons to be pointed at your enemies, but because protecting others is what we do. It is who we are. It is what Earth taught us to be." She looked at High Speaker Dorvax. "Humanity pledges itself to the defense of the Galactic Federation. When the threat comes, and Keeper Solace says it will come, we will be there. We will go where you cannot follow. We will endure what you cannot survive. We will protect what you cannot save, not because you demand it of us, but because we choose it." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Humanity was designated as guardians of the Federation. 3 months later, Ambassador Lyra Akoy stood on a hilltop in Kenya, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. The message had been delivered. Earth knew its role now, and across the planet, humanity had begun to prepare. The darkness was coming, but for the first time, the galaxy had hope. Because the children of the Crucible were ready.